Welcome to Montana Shares, your opportunity to find out about the nonprofits that make our state so great. I'm your host, Bill Crane, and today I have Liz with Montana Nonprofit Association. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you.
So is it fun to be back here on the other side of the table, or is it like something you blanked out of your mind?
I tried to forget.
Well,
No,
welcome back in a new role.
Thank you.
And let's chat a little bit, just for people that may not know. I hope no one doesn't know what you do, but tell us what M&A does,
Sure.
high-level view.
Montana Nonprofit Association probably could be compared to the Chamber of Commerce, but for nonprofit organizations. Mm-hmm. And for us, that's it's not all nonprofits, it's charitable nonprofits, so 501c3s. Mm-hmm. Those are arts, environment, human services, houses of worship, hospitals, universities, colleges anyway, are all examples of charitable nonprofits. We have 600 members, and some are all volunteer organizations that just run with a board of directors and a bunch of good-hearted folks. Mm-hmm. And then some are some of the largest employers in the state, some of the mental health service providers, disability service providers, those kinds of folks. Our work is based on the belief that a strong nonprofit sector is really essential to Montana's vitality, our prosperity, our future, the life we want for ourselves and our kids. So we spend our time and resources working in various ways to strengthen and promote the nonprofit sector in the state.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you been doing it? I don't know your start date.
For me personally?
No, for M&A.
For
in
M&A,
general.
15 years.
15 years, excellent.
Yeah, and I've been there for almost 7 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know from my side of the table, having you as a resource, just to be able to call up or get answers, or you go to your website, get best practices, it's an invaluable resource. So
well, thank you.
Everyone sign up if you're a nonprofit.
Everyone sign up. I know it's like there's a sliding scale, it's super inexpensive, and the benefit is great. I had somebody email this morning and from another part of the state, and she said, you know, we're redoing our bylaws, and there's this question about whether the board sets the compensation for the executive and the employees, or just the executive, and I think it should be just the executive. And I was able, just like right before I came here, actually, just whip off an answer, and she was like, wow, that's so clear and succinct.
It's worth my dues right there.
It is,
just
it's
that
worth
one
the
thing
dues.
that you could waste hours on trying to look
exactly,
it up. You
trying
just
to
get an
understand.
answer. Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the issues with lots of nonprofits is they maybe don't have the best governance, because there's no training really for being on a board.
Right.
And you guys have all these resources, so if you need a policy created, there's probably one that you can get people started with, or that kind of wonderful resources. Yeah,
our website is a great resource for nonprofits. We have, a lot of our policies are sitting on the front page of the website under kind of the, something about us. And people are free to take those policies and work with them however they want. We recognize that many times we're looked to as a model, so we keep them up to date. We have a committee that reviews policies on a regular schedule, so that what you see is really, a best practice, I guess you'd say. And then we do, you're right about boards. From our perspective, a nonprofit is only going to be as strong as its board of directors. And so we spend a lot of time and energy on board training. That is one of the trainings we'll actually do on demand, like come in and do a board training. And then it's also part of our regular kind of staple of trainings that we offer every year. Our training calendar, by the way, is going out tomorrow.
And going out, meaning onto the website or being emailed out to members?
Emailed out, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's out there to find out how to be a better nonprofit.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, great. How was 2017? Let's talk about it.
Sure. I think of 2017 in three phases, really. For the nonprofit community, the first part of 2017 was really characterized by a sense of uncertainty. People didn't know what the new administration was going to look like, how it was going to be. There was a lot of fear about what kinds of changes would take place. Would the nonprofit sector be valued? Would it be funded? Not that the sector be funded. Would the services in communities that nonprofits do, would those receive adequate funding? So a lot of uncertainty about change, and there was such rapid change, with all the different things that happened. So there was that, and then that kind of gave way, I think of May and June as a time when that kind of gave way to general pessimism, like this isn't going to go well.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the thinking, this isn't going to go well. And we had that for 2 or 3 months. I think fundamentally, individuals who work in the nonprofit sector are not pessimistic. We are more realists, and I think we kind of then, by the end of the last quarter anyway, or a little more than that, just swung back to realism. So, well, these are the facts we have to deal with, and so we best kind of figure out how we're going to do that. Of course, then, at the end of the year, we got hit with 2 things in Montana. One was the special session with the deficit. Mm-hmm. That helped us face reality really fast.
You bet.
And then the tax reform and everything that went with that. And so I think we kind of went from uncertainty to pessimism to realism back to uncertainty. And now people are once again there is a pretty widespread sense of pessimism, I think, that it's going to be very tough going as we move into 2018.
Mm-hmm. And really, in that whole span of all those changes, everyone still did the work that they were supposed to do. We get up, we go to work, we run our nonprofits.
Yeah.
In spite of all that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think by and large, I didn't see like nonprofits falling by the wayside. Everyone got up and did their job.
Yeah.
So now we are 4 days into 2018.
Right.
What do you see? What's your crystal ball say?
Well, so there's the federal stuff and then there's the state stuff. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so just talking policy for a little bit. Going back to state, some of the nonprofits were hit pretty hard with the special session.
Mm-hmm.
I think disability services, there were certain kinds of services that are going to just go away for some organizations, some of the vocational stuff for disability services, some of the mental health services. Western Montana Mental Health Center had some big articles about cuts in their organization. We've seen with Helen Industries, with some other disability providers, about cuts in their services. So I think the special session already set people up for some cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, although people kept going, I think that was the reality part, like, wow, okay, we're going to keep going, but it is going to look different. We're going to have to do some things differently. And nonprofits already do a lot with too little,
Right.
I mean, we're just kind of known for that, executive burnout, all kinds of things where you just try to keep meeting the needs, and as the resources decline, very often the demand goes up because the resources are preventing that from happening.
Very
and then,
much so.
Yeah, so it's just this really rapid gap that develops
Mm-hmm.
between what you have available and what the need is. So there was the special session and kind of the reality of that. And then with tax reform, I think what we're all looking at now is, first of all, just needing information. What does it really mean? Mm-hmm. And there will be a webinar next Thursday. So you can find out at our office or where that is, or what the information is on that, how to register. But the National Council of Nonprofits, of which we're of course a member, is doing a webinar on the implications of tax reform for nonprofits. And they're looking at everything from your payroll systems and withholding to other kinds of issues around state budgets and things like that. So very operational and pragmatic to how to kind of think about the future for your state budgets. So that is information that will be out there, and I really encourage people to sign up for that. Thinking about Montana, the latest estimate that we have is that it'll be about a $46 million deficit increase for Montana is the estimation that they used modeling to come up with it. Mm-hmm. I have not heard that I have heard that there is not at this point a special session scheduled to talk about where that $46 million is going to come from. So I don't know what mechanisms there are in place to look at how we're going to deal with an additional $46 million cut. But it has to happen, mm-hmm. So that's something that Montana's nonprofits are going to have to deal with. And then I think that probably the bigger concern for us, as far as the federal tax reform, there's some specific things, but is that $1.5 trillion deficit, they're already starting to talk about cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, the entitlement programs and other human service programs that will be the source of the funding to make up for the deficit. And I think there's a lot of concern about that. Just, how will nonprofits be able to fill our unique role in communities as a partner to the community, as a partner to government in getting services to our people? How will we be able to do that if we start cutting so deeply that organizations start to fold? And that's a real question.
It'd be a wake-up call for the people to see what they've taken for granted for really quite some time. This is a significant federal change.
Yeah, it is.
And a significant federal attitude, both, I think, to put it simply.
And I've seen some things written kind of by maybe people who aren't as involved in the nonprofit sector as I am, which is 99.9% of the people in the world. But, and it's kind of like, well, nonprofits are going to have to figure out how not to rely on government. And I just think, wow, I think we're getting to the point where government's going to have to figure out how to not rely on nonprofits.
That's the question.
Because if you cut us off at the knees, at some point, you've got to make a choice about how you're going to serve people. And we can either have a large government that doesn't have a nonprofit structure in place to help provide services in communities, or you sufficiently partner up, which requires funding. We can't do bake sales to have people staff group homes. It's just not going to work. And nonprofits are pretty notorious for being very creative and inventive about how to get funding. But at the end of the day, if there's an expectation of a certain level of service, and a lot of times that's driven by licensure, you have to have certain things in place. And those are going to cost money. And we can't be paying our people who are taking care of little kids, we can't be paying them less than somebody who's making hamburgers. And not to say one's better than the other, but it just, it's like, where's our value in society? What is it we value, and how are we going to spend our resources?
And so I don't think probably any of us really have a good feel on what this is going to trickle down to, but let's go a little more specific into the concept that the charitable deduction is going to go away, which I don't think it is. It's just that the standard deduction is so much higher that most people will be taking that. Right. Is that a more or less correct statement?
That is absolutely correct. And I think that's been one of the hard parts about messaging, is that it isn't that the charitable deduction is going away. It's right there where it always has been. And I think Congress saw that too and said, we're not touching the charitable deduction. But if you double the standard deduction for non-itemizers, what it did was in Montana, or nationally, like 30% of the people itemize, right? Certain 30% of taxpayers. That number is going to go to about 5%. So that takes out a whole bunch of people who were in that 30% who will no longer be itemizing. So will they still give? Well, heck, we hope so. And we think they will. Will they give as much? If somebody hands you $100 and you will get a tax deduction for giving a good bit of it away, there is an incentive there to give more. Not that you won't still give. I think a lot of us think in terms of 10% or 15%, and try to give of our resources. That's still going to happen. But I think we can expect the amount of giving to go down. Hopefully it won't, but otherwise, why would we create incentives?
Right, and we still have the 70% that already used the standard deduction that still probably gave.
Right.
That wasn't their reason for giving.
Right, and that as we looked at Montana's numbers, the top 12% of wage earners gave 46% of the total charitable giving in the state. And I don't remember what year, it might have been 2015, you know how the data is always backwards. But so the top 12% of earners gave 46%. So we potentially lose up to 54%. I mean, that's another way to look at it.
No,
hopefully that won't happen.
I hate data, it's horrible.
I know, hopefully that won't happen.
Well, wow, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And we're starting to work on our agenda for the 2019 legislative session, and we're looking at the endowment tax credit. And Mary Rutherford from Montana Community Foundation and I are leading that effort. And so we'll be looking at, is there still the same benefit to having that credit structured the way it is currently? And will it still reach the same people that currently reaches? So it's on our agenda to incentivize giving in Montana. And I once heard on a webinar or something like this that our tax structure really is representative of our values. And I've really held on to that. So I think it's a fair statement. What we spend our money on is what we value. So if we don't spend money on incentivizing philanthropy, that does say something about whether or not we really value that. If we make it more difficult for nonprofits to function in our legal system, in our regulatory system, it says something about the value we place on nonprofits. Tax exemption is a tax structure that indicates a value that we hold for this unique organization called a nonprofit. We represent democracy. We're on the front line of civil society. We really are, as a sector, nonprofits are representative of how, most representative, I think, of how we want our communities to look and how we want the quality of life to be for ourselves, for our neighbors. And so I would hope that our tax structure continues to support the health of that, because it's a real statement about how we want society to be.
Wow. We could finish on that, but do you have any other things you want to wrap up on?
I would say we're beginning to look at emerging leadership. I think I would say for young people to know that nonprofit work is meaningful and it's a viable career path. Volunteerism can make life really rich and exciting. So, you know, we're at a point where we're like, wonder how long we're going to do this. And so one of the things we're really looking at is that next generation coming in. We're going to spend a lot of time on that in the next couple of years. So that's probably an important message, that it's an important way that we live out our values. And I really encourage young people to think about that, and not just in terms of volunteerism, but in terms of a viable career path. We need it.
Right. And we have universities that actually have some sort of nonprofit leadership career path choice, or
yeah, a lot of our higher education institutions have something. University of Montana has a program. And they do a really fine job with that. So, and we'll be doing training this year. You'll see on our training calendar on emerging leadership, preparing boards to bring in younger board members, especially in rural Montana. You know, we kind of look around and think, who are we going to get? Well, there are people there. They just don't look like a typical board member, so we're not asking them.
I think that's a huge thing, getting younger people involved on boards.
It is, and we think we can help with that. So we're involved with it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
And really, truly, thank you for the work that you do day to day and helping us at the other side of the nonprofit world.
Yeah.
We truly appreciate it.
Thanks. It's our joy.
Good.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you guys for tuning in. As always, we appreciate you watching. Have a wonderful evening.